So should anybody who is born in the United States automatically be a citizen? Is that what the people who wrote the 14th Amendment intended? Is that the idea that the founders and framers had, for that matter? And is this just another great rant for the right-wingers to bring out the racists to help win elections in 2010? Frankly, I think that's why we're hearing about it right now. Or is there a larger issue here? And frankly, I think that there is. On the phone with us, Benjamin Johnson, the executive director of the American Immigration Council. ImmigrationPolicy.org is their website. Benjamin, welcome to the program.
It's great to be here. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. At first, I was operating on the assumption that the 14th Amendment, which says that any person born in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof, born or naturalized, is a citizen. At first, I was assuming that literally meant what I guess the Supreme Court in the 1960s decided it now means, which is that there's a big baby tourism business operating out of South Korea because they have a military draft. So Korean mothers will hop on a plane, come over to the United States, have their baby here. The child instantly gets dual citizenship and is no longer subject to the South Korean draft. And it's actually a big business in Korea. And other people for other reasons are coming here to have children or just accidentally have children. And I thought that's what they had in mind. But when I go back, I've got the actual congressional record from May 30th, 1866. And Senator Howard from Michigan, the guy who put forward the proposal that became the 14th Amendment, one of the authors of it, he said the amendment I've offered is simply declaratory with what regard as law. He said this will not, of course, include persons born in the United States who are foreigners, aliens, or who belong to the families of ambassadors or foreign ministers accredited to the government of the United States, but will include every other class of persons. And in fact, for a long time, it didn't include Native Americans because they were considered foreigners.
Well, that's right. I mean, the historical context, though, was, keep in mind that at that time, we had no limits on immigration to the United States.
That's right. Those didn't come until the 1920s.
Right. Anybody who got here, with the exception of Chinese, who were specifically barred and could not acquire citizenship. They were, barred not only from coming, but those that were here barred from ever becoming citizens. So one
of the most horrible and racist laws in our history, but a very interesting story behind that has to do with the history of the labor movement. Pardon my interrupting you.
No, that's okay. And that story is part of this, too, because eventually we would come to ask this question of, well, what happens to the children of these Chinese immigrants who we have permanently barred from being citizens? So that's part of this story. But again, the historical context of what it means to be a foreigner, what it means to be an outsider in the United States was different then, because you could come here on arrival, claim to be part of the residents. The foreigners and that he's talking about in that historical context are much more akin to the diplomats that we have today. Right. And the Native American issue was also different in that those Native Americans had established tribal governments within the United States.
They were recognized as separate nations, and they still are,
exactly,
to a large extent.
So that's very different than folks that are here in the United States, working residents, ongoing parts of our community, paying taxes, all of the things that immigrants did then and do now.
Right.
The 14th Amendment had always contemplated that those folks that are here and part of the body politic and the communities and made sort of settled here, that those are the folks that were covered by the 14th Amendment.
Well, and arguably, really the 14th Amendment was about African Americans. My grandfather on my father's side, on my mother's side it was from the 1600s, but on my father's side, my grandfather came here in 1917, before we had those anti-immigration laws or those regulating immigration laws, and simply declared himself a citizen when he went through Ellis Island. And but now here we have the United Kingdom, Australia, Ireland, New Zealand, France, a number of countries have backed away from, is it pronounced jus soli, the legal doctrine of if you're born here, you are a citizen?
Right, it is. And also lots of those countries. I mean, we behave differently than those countries in a lot of different ways.
Sure.
I mean, we have a constitution in England. The Parliament is not second to the Constitution. The Constitution is secondary to Parliament. The Parliament,
well, and to the Queen.
Exactly. So there's lots of things that we do differently, and I think before we go pulling at this thread, we ought to take a long, hard look at the fact that, I mean, what disturbs me about this is apparently we are willing to do anything now, including amend the Constitution to avoid confronting this issue of undocumented immigration head on. Through policies of enforcement and improving the legal channels of immigration, if we actually got members of Congress, forced them to reform our immigration laws, this would not be the issue that it is today. But this is this political feeding frenzy on how to score political points on the backs of this issue rather than actually dealing with it is a tragedy in American politics.
I absolutely agree with you, Benjamin Johnson, with the executive director of the American Immigration Council, immigrationpolicy.org. And we do need comprehensive immigration reform. And we don't have an illegal immigration problem in this country. We have an illegal employer problem in this country. And, I mean, there's a whole bunch of ands that we can attach to that. But there are two big problems, in my opinion, with the 14th Amendment. And the first is that we really should have a discussion about whether it's appropriate that the Koreans have a tourism trade just for the purpose of getting their kids out of the military in South Korea by using our citizenship laws. And the second is the fact that the word person in that first article of the 14th Amendment has been used since 1886 to identify corporations. And so I propose that we go to people like Lindsey Graham and these other right-wing Republicans who want to amend the 14th Amendment to say that, you know, you at least one of your parents has to be a citizen, like they've done in France, for example, before you're a citizen, and say, okay, we'll give you that if you'll give us the insertion of the word natural before the word person, so that corporations can no longer claim First Amendment rights to participate in politics and lie in commerce. They can no longer claim Fourth Amendment privacy rights. They can no longer claim Fifth Amendment rights against self-incrimination, which is how the tobacco and asbestos companies hid their crimes for all those years. And they can no longer claim 14th Amendment rights against discrimination, which is how big box retailers are forcing themselves on communities.
You raised two great points.
Let's swap them.
To the first point about folks coming here, I'm not going to deny that there are folks that may be doing this, but I would be careful about how I characterize that. The idea that it's big business in Korea, it could be big business in Korea because they charge a lot of money and.
Well, it's not a big business. I mean, it's
20 people coming over here to do it. So
yeah.
I wouldn't want to amend our Constitution or even make immigration policy based on what is a really, really small aberration. There are ways to address that. There are ways to deny to the people that are doing that. So you can. We're sort of looking at this through the wrong end of the telescope in terms of narrowing in on the things that matter here.
But do you think it's just entirely appropriate that if somebody is born here, even by accident, their parents happen to be changing planes in the United States and mom goes into labor, that person is a citizen?
Those kinds of situations wouldn't apply here. Subject to the jurisdiction of the United States means that they are subject to punishments. I mean, think about it in the context of...
Well, that's the argument that the right-wingers are making. They're saying that people who come in here illegally are not subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. They're here illegally. Therefore, their children are not legal citizens.
We lock them up and put them in jail, don't we? That's something
not their kids.
Yes. If they violate a crime in the United States, are they subject to penalties for the violation of those crimes? Yes, that's because they are subject to the jurisdictions of the United States.
Okay.
Diplomats who commit crimes
are not subject.
They
have
diplomatic immunity. They are not subject to our laws.
I get it.
That's the difference.
I get it. Okay, you have educated me. Benjamin Johnson, immigrationpolicy.org, the executive director of the American Immigration Council. This is a mess. This is a mess, and the Republicans are going to milk it for all they can to get the racist vote out this fall.
Amen to that.
Benjamin, thank you so much for dropping by.
It's my pleasure.
Good talking with you.